I met a guy called George, and he was older than me, and basically, when I was in the first startup that I was working in, he, and I were hanging out in the office late at night, and he said to me, "Jens, do you know what the two most important questions in life are?" And I said, "No, George, but you will tell me, right?" And he said, "Well, if he'd studied for philosophy, he would know." And I said, "Okay." So, and he basically said the two most important questions in life are, who am I and why am I here? And it's really true. And he said, in philosophy, that's what you talk about for 3 years when you're an undergraduate at Oxford. And I can't confirm that because I'm a natural scientist, but I've never forgotten that. And I actually honestly think that's a really, really good point. And I know who all of you are because all of you are either founders or are people who are investing in startups. So that's who you are. I just want to talk more about why we're all here, why what we do really matters. Because if you think about it, say 400 years ago, if you wanted to be wealthy and influential, all of the wealth and the influence and the power was conferred by a land. You had to be a lord. You had to manage the land. If you wanted to have more power, you'd have to go to war with some other guy, battle it out, and then if you win, you get more land. And then you have a larger pyramid, and you control more land, and you have more wealth, and you have more power. And that's been going on in the history of mankind for as long as we can actually look through recorded history to the Egyptians and beyond. It's all about land and who controls the land. The most important thing to understand is it's a null-sum game. Some guy or some gal controls the land. There can only be one person, but there's a finite amount of land. And who controls it at the end of the day probably doesn't really matter so much. Yeah. About 250 years ago, something absolutely magical happened because somebody invented the company. The company is a fictional construct that just exists in our head. It actually doesn't really exist. I mean, it exists in law, but it physically does not exist, right? But what you can do is you can use it to pull people, money, assets. You can do, all sorts of things inside companies. And the most important thing to understand is that companies are additive. You have more companies, and they build on each other, and they build, and they build, and they build. And it's not a null-sum game. It's an additive game. The pie grows. And all of the progress of humanity that has happened over the last 250 years is completely impossible without companies. And if you think about it like that, you start to understand that people who start companies are the people who make the pie larger. And the people who finance this startup activity are the people who will help make the pie larger. And we in this room are all here because our job, whether it's I just want to get rich, I want to change the world, I want to look great, it doesn't matter. You all make the pie for everybody larger, and you advance humanity as a whole. It's super important, right? And if you think about the communists, what they say is all the companies should be gone, and we're going to go back to a feudal society, but there is no, person who is of, there is no noblesse. I'm now the king. And maybe, also understand what some of these people name the party after themselves because they want to be the queen of Germany. That's what this is at the end all about. And then you also understand why these companies with communist rule are also incredibly poor because we go back to a 16th century or 17th century society and the pie is gone. Everything that everybody works for is wiped off. Yeah. Anyway, going back to all of you, I feel extremely privileged that I can run a company where we make about, I don't even know, 2 investments a week, say 100 a year, and super exciting technology companies. And we really honestly try to help the founders with everything we've got, which is largely our networks and our knowledge. We've now invested in a few hundred companies. Some of them are taking off right now, thanks to an incredible, the acceleration is so amazing. It's unbelievable. So thanks for having me here. And maybe you remember this speech far more if I said, I was at Cambridge and I did this and I did that. And then, one day later, it's all gone. I don't think that this is important. What's important is, basically making the pie larger, finding your own destiny, and basically doing everything you can and helping the. Without you, I wouldn't have a job, or actually anything to do. 50, it's not even a job. I wouldn't have anything to do. So thanks for doing what you do. I think it's absolutely awesome, and just fulfill your own destiny and help the world just by doing what you do. Thank you.